Good morning, Fall River. My name is Gloria Sadler, and I am honored to stand before you today as the Vice President of Bristol Black Collective. It is with great pleasure and enthusiasm that I will be your guide throughout this remarkable event as we celebrate Juneteenth and the legacy of Frederick Douglass. Juneteenth goes beyond the recognition of freedom for a specific group of people. It encompasses a larger vision of freedom for everyone. It embodies the belief that true liberation can only be achieved when each and every individual is granted their inherent rights and opportunities. In our pursuit of freedom, we must never forget our history. It is through this understanding of our past, that we can build our inclusive and just future. Frederick Douglass was a fiery spokesman for racial equality and was involved for the fight for women's rights. Long before Juneteenth, Frederick Douglass was born into slavery around 1818. Douglass became a key leader of the abolitionist movement, a fiery spokesman for racial inequality, and was involved, I may have double pages here, this may be a double reading. On July 5th, 1852, in Rochester, New York, Douglass gave one of his most famous speeches. What to the slave is the 4th of July? He was addressing the Rochester Ladies Anti-Slavery Society and questioned how enslaved people could possibly celebrate U.S. Independence Day when they were kept in bondage by that same country. Today, members of our community will assist us in reading that very address. Before we begin our program, we would like to thank those who made today's program possible. Our readers for today's program: Prince Jason Castellano, Nadia Paquette, Elaine Agnes, and a Mr. Coleman. We'd also like to thank Lori Lynn, who has volunteered her time. And thank you, Mayor Coogan and the City of Fall River, Mass Cultural Council, Mass Humanities, and our gracious hosts, of course, Chris and the team here at Duke's Bakery and Cafe. Thank you for supporting this program. Here's a bit of Juneteenth history. On September 22nd, 1862, President Lincoln issued his preliminary Emancipation Proclamation, which stated that enslaved people in those states or parts of state still in rebellion as of January 1st, 1863, would be declared free. 2.5 years later, on June 19, 1865, more than 2,000 federal soldiers of the 13th Army Corps arrived in Galveston, and with them were Major General Gordon Granger, commanding officer for the District of Texas. Granger delivered to Galveston General Orders Number 3. The orders informed all Texans that, in accordance with a proclamation from the Executive of the United States, all slaves were free. From this point on Juneteenth, it became symbolic, representing freedom in the African American community. Juneteenth is referred to by its many names: Emancipation Day, Freedom Day, Jubilee Day, Juneteenth Independence, and Black independence. It is a day that reminds us of the long and arduous journey towards freedom, a journey that continues to shape our society today. Often, we are led to believe that slavery ended with the conclusion of the Civil War, but the truth is far more complex. Juneteenth holds a special place in my heart because while it may not have been the only day Black Americans discovered their freedom, it was the first day when every Black American learned of their liberation. It stands as a powerful symbol of unity, resilience, and the unyielding spirit for those who fought for equality. Let me share a bit of flag history.
Good morning. My name is Tia Castellano, the director of Bristol Black Collective, and thank you all for being here today. The flag history. As we commemorate Juneteenth, a momentous day in American history, it is vital to recognize the symbolic power of that Juneteenth flag. The Juneteenth flag was designed by Ben Haith, a Bostonian. Serves as a poignant representation of freedom, resilience, and the enduring spirit of the African American community. On the tables, you will find some of our Juneteenth programs, and on the back of it, you will see the Juneteenth flag. Each color of the flag carries profound meaning. The red represents resilience and strength, paying homage to the resilience of the African Americans throughout history. The middle stripe signifies purity and hope for a better future, symbolizing the journey towards equality. And finally, the blue represents perseverance, symbolizing the vast opportunities and possibilities that lie ahead. At the center of the Juneteenth flag, we find a striking 5-pointed star. This star, bursting with symbolism, represents both Texas and freedom. The arc that extends across the star is a nod to a new horizon, reflecting the progress and continuous pursuit of justice. Juneteenth serves as a powerful reminder that if we forget where we came from, if we overlook the struggles and triumphs of those who come before us, we risk perpetuating the same injustices and inequalities that plagued our nation for far too long. At this time, I'd like to begin the Fredrick Douglass reading now that we've given you some background history. And we will call our first reader, Prince Jason Castellano.
Mr. President, friends, and fellow citizens, the task before me is one which requires much previous thought and study for its proper performance. The papers and placards say that I am to deliver a 4th of July oration. This certainly sounds large and out of the common way, for it is true that I have often had the privilege to speak in this beautiful hall and to address how many who now honor me with their presence. The fact is, ladies and gentlemen, the distance between this platform and the slave plantation from which I escaped is considerable, and the difficulties to be overcome in getting from the latter to the former are by no means slight. That I am here today is to me a matter of astonishment as well as of gratitude. This, for the purpose of this celebration, is the 4th of July. It is the birthday of your nation, national independence, and for your political freedom. This to you is what the Passover was to the emancipated people of God. It carries your minds back to the day and to the act of your great deliverance. This celebration also marks the beginning of another year of your national life and reminds you that the Republic of America is now 76 years old. I am glad, fellow citizens, that your nation is so young. You are even now only in the beginning of your national career, still lingering in the period of childhood. I repeat, I am glad this is so. There is hope in the thought, and hope is much needed under the dark clouds which lower above the horizon. Fellow citizens, the simple story is that 76 years ago, the people of this country were British subjects. The style and title of your sovereign people, in which you now glory, was not then born. You were under the British crown. Your fathers esteemed the English government as the home government. England is as the fatherland, although a considerable distance from your home, imposed in the exercise of its parental prerogatives upon its colonial children, such restraints, burdens, and limitations as, in its mature judgment, it deemed wise, right, and proper. But your fathers, who had not adopted the idea of infallibility of government and the absolute character of its acts, presumed to differ. The home government is in respect to the wisdom and the justice of some of those burdens and restraints. They went so far as to pronounce the measures of government unjust, unreasonable, and oppressive, and altogether such as ought not to be quietly submitted to. I scarcely need say, fellow citizens, that my opinion of those measures fully accords with that of your fathers, feeling themselves harshly and unjustly treated by the home government. Your fathers, like men of honesty and men of spirit, earnestly sought redress. The petition and remonstrated. They did so in a decorous, respectful, and loyal manner. This, however, did not answer the purpose. They saw themselves treated with severe indifference, coldness, and scorn. Oppression makes a wise man mad. Your fathers became restive under this treatment. They felt themselves the victims of grievous wrongs, wholly incurable in the colonial capacity. With brave men, there is always a remedy for oppression. Just here, the idea of a total separation of the colonies from the crown was born. It was a startling idea, much more so than we, at this distance of time, regarded. The timid and prudent of that day were, of course, shocked and alarmed by it. Their oppression to the then dangerous thought was earnest and powerful. But amid all their terror and affrighted vociferations against it, the alarming and revolutionary idea moved on, and the country with it. On the 2nd of July, 1776, the old Continental Congress, to the dismay of the lovers of ease and the worshippers of property, clothed that dreadful idea with all the authority of national sanction. They did so in the form of a resolution. We seldom hit upon resolutions drawn up in our day whose transparency is at all equal. Resolved that these united colonies are end of right out to be free and independent states, that they are absolved from all allegiance to the British Crown. Citizens, your fathers made good that resolution. They succeed, and today and reap the fruits of their success. The freedom gained is ours, and you therefore may properly celebrate this anniversary. The 4th of July is the first great fact in your nation's history, the very ring bolt in the chain of your yet undeveloped destiny.
Thank you. So before I bring our next reader up, I just want to give everybody a little cue that this is a safe space. This is very heavy material that often we are not all exposed to, and I want to make sure that everybody feels comfortable. We can have a discussion about the material. We most certainly have people in the room who are trained and to speak about in depth about this material. So definitely look for Mark and Mr. Ron to if we'd like to have a discussion more in depth later after we finish the reading. And if you need to take a moment, please feel free. There's seating outside if the material becomes too heavy and you need a break. All right? At this time, I'd like to call up Miss Lori Lynn.
Fellow citizens, I am not wanting in respect for the fathers of this republic. The signers of the Declaration of Independence were brave men. I cannot contemplate their great needs with less than admiration. They were statesmen, patriots, and heroes, and for the good they did and the principles they contended for, I will unite with you to honor their memory. They loved their country better than their own private interests, and all will concede that is a rare virtue that ought to command respect. He who will intelligently lay down his life for his country is a man whom it is not in human nature to despise. Your fathers staked their lives, their fortunes, and their sacred honor on the cause of their country. They were peacemen, but they preferred revolution to peaceful submission to bondage. They were quiet men, but they did not shrink from agitating against oppression. They showed forbearance, but they knew its limits. They believed in order, but not in the order of tyranny. With them, nothing was settled that was not right. With them, justice, liberty, and humanity were final, not slavery and oppression. You may well cherish the memory of such men. They were great in their day and generation. Their solid manhood stands out the more as we contrast it with these degenerate times. How circumspect, exact, and proportionate were all their movements. How unlike the politicians of an hour. Their statesmanship looked beyond the passing moment and stretched away in strength into the distant future. Fully appreciating the hardship to be encountered, firmly believing in the right of their cause, wisely measuring the terrible odds against them, your fathers, the fathers of this republic, laid the cornerstone of the national superstructure, which has risen and still rises in grandeur around you. Of this fundamental work, this day is the anniversary. My business, if I have any here today, is with the present. The accepted time with God and his cause is the ever-living now. We have to do with the past only as we can make it useful to the present and to the future. Now is the time, the important time. Your fathers have lived, died, and have done their work, and have done much of it well. You live and must die, and you must do your work. You have no right to enjoy a child's share in the labor of your fathers, unless your children are to be blessed by your labors. You have no right to wear out and waste the hard-earned fame of your fathers to cover your indolence. Fellow citizens, pardon me, allow me to ask, why am I called upon to speak here today? What have I, or those I represent, to do with your national independence? Are the great principles of political freedom and of natural justice embodied in that Declaration of Independence extended to us? And am I therefore called upon to bring our humble offering to the national altar and to confess the benefits and express devout gratitude for the blessings resulting from your independence to us?
So at this point, he's asking a question to the audience. What does independence to the Black man and woman and child have to do with him. On the July 4th, he was asked to come and give this speech. Now, the speech is taking place on July 5th, because he had to really look within himself and come up with this speech to give it. What does July 4th have to do with us at this present time? We're not free. And as we're celebrating today is Juneteenth, June 19th, 1865 is when all Black people in this country were notified that they were free. Our next reader has not arrived, so if I could graciously ask Mr. Mark Conrad to come up and take a part in our program today.
Sure.
Thank you.
Where I start and where I finish.
Yes, so there is your starting point, and then you.
Wait, where's the stop? It says that's POP right there.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. First of all, I want to tell you what this means to me. I don't know if you noticed I'm wearing my kippah. All right, I call Juneteenth the American Passover. Jews, for thousands and thousands of years, every year we have this big party called a Passover Seder, and we celebrate our freedom. How Moses took us out of bondage and slavery in Egypt and brought us into our promised land. So for me personally, all right, this is my connection, and why I've always been a big advocate, and I'm very proud, Tia knows this really well, I'm very proud to say that my neighborhood, the Corky Road Neighborhood Association, sponsored in Griffin Park Fall River's first Juneteenth, before it was a national holiday. So obviously, Fredrick Douglass has been one of those characters that's just been able to be sustained throughout history in America. That's another great question to ask. Why are we still reading his words today? Well, what he said was very powerful, very articulate, and very true. And as I'm appreciating how you're doing this today, we're actually getting a much deeper history lesson, I'll even say on a college level, of what really this holiday means. So let me begin. Would to God, both for your sakes and ours, that an affirmative answer could be truthfully returned to these questions. Then what would my task be light and my burden easy and delightful? But such is not the state of the case. I say it with a sad sense of the disparity between us. I am not included within the pale of this glorious anniversary. Your high independence only reveals the immeasurable distance between us. The blessings in which you this day rejoice are not enjoyed in common. The rich inheritance of justice, liberty, prosperity, and independence bequeathed by your fathers is shared by you, not by me. The sunlight that brought life and healing to you has brought stripes and death to me. This 4th of July is yours, not mine. You may rejoice, I must mourn. To drag a man in fetters into the grand illuminated temple of liberty and call upon him to join you in joyous anthems were inhuman mockery and sacrilegious irony. Do you mean, citizens, to mock me by asking me to speak today? Fellow citizens, above your national tumultuous joy, I hear the mournful wail of millions whose chains, heavy and grievous yesterday, are today rendered more intolerable by the Jubilee shouts that reach them. My subject, then, fellow citizens, is American slavery. I shall see this day from the slave's point of view. Standing here, identified with the American bondman, making his wrongs mine, I do not hesitate to declare with all my soul that the character and conduct of this nation never looked blacker to me than on this 4th of July. Though the return to declarations of the past or the professions of the present, the conduct of the nation seems equally hideous and revolting. America is false to the past, false to the present, and solemnly binds herself to be false to the future. Standing with God and crushed and bleeding slave on this occasion, I will, in the name of humanity, which is outraged, in the name of liberty, which is fettered, in the name of the Constitution and the Bible, which are disregarded and trampled upon, dare to call into question and to denounce, with all the emphasis I can command, everything that serves to perpetuate slavery, the great sin and shame of America. I will not equivocate. I will not excuse. I will use the severest language I can command, and yet not one word shall escape me that any man whose judgment is not blinded by prejudice or who is not at heart a slaveholder shall not confess to be right and just. I fancy I hear someone of my audience saying, it is just in this circumstance that you and your brother abolitionists fail to make a favorable impression on the public mind. Would you argue more and denounce less? Would you persuade more, rebuke less? Your cause would be much more likely to succeed. But I submit, where all is plain, there is nothing to be argued. What point in the anti-slavery creed would you have me argue? Must I understand and provoke that the slave is a man? The slaveholders themselves acknowledge it in the enactment of laws for their government. They acknowledge it when they punish disobedience on the part of the slave. There are 72 crimes in the state of Virginia which, if committed by a black man, subject him to the punishment of death, while only 2 of the same crimes will subject a white man to the like punishment. What is this but the acknowledgement that the slave is a moral, intellectual, and responsible being? Southern statute books are covered with enactments forbidding, under several severe fines and penalties, the teaching of the slave to read or to write. One can point to any such laws in reference to the beasts of the field. Then I may consent to argue the manhood of the slave. When the dogs in your streets, when the fowls of the air, when the cattle on your hills, when the fish of the sea and the reptiles that crawl shall be unable to distinguish the slave from a brute, then will I argue with you that the slave is a man. For the present, it is enough to affirm the equal manhood of the Negro race. Is it not astonishing that while we're plowing, planting, and reaping, using all kinds of mechanical tools, erecting houses, constructing bridges, building ships, working in metals of brass, iron, copper, silver, and gold, that while we are reading, writing, and ciphering, acting as clerks, merchants, and secretaries, having among us lawyers, doctors, ministers, poets, authors, editors, orators, and teachers, that while we are engaged in all manner of enterprises common to other men, digging gold in California, capturing the whale in the Pacific, feeding sheep and cattle on the hillside, living, moving, acting, thinking, planning, living in families as husbands, wives, and children, and above all, confessing and worshiping the Christian's God, and looking hopefully for life and immortality beyond the grave, we are called upon to prove that we are men. Would you have me argue that man is entitled to liberty? That he is the rightful owner of his own body? You have already declared it, but I must argue the wrongfulness of slavery. Is it to be settled by the rules of logic and argumentation as a matter beset with great difficulty, involving a doubtful application of the principle of justice? Hard to be understood? How should I look to today, in the presence of Americans, to show that men have a natural right to freedom? To do so would be to make myself ridiculous and to offer an insult to your understanding. There is not a man beneath the canopy of heaven that does not know that slavery is wrong for him.
Thank you. That was a very powerful reading, but that was also powerful content. He's speaking about his own circumstances as a slave before he became this brilliant orator that's called upon to speak about the very thing that he escaped from. He escaped being out in the fields doing hard work, and prior to that, he had learned to read. And he had learned to read because he had a missus that took pity on him and felt that she wanted to teach him. She didn't know it was wrong. But that flair, that inch that she gave him, he wanted the whole mile. He wanted to know what was so important about this reading. He wanted to know why was it kept from us. And when he was able to, he gave it to his fellow man. Our next reader is going to be Miss Gloria Sadler.
What am I to argue that it is wrong to make men brutes, to rob them of their liberty, to work them without wages, to keep them ignorant of their relations to their fellow men, to beat them with sticks, to flay their flesh with the lash, to load their limbs with iron, to hunt them with dogs, to sell them at auction, to sunder their families, to knock out their teeth, to burn their flesh, to starve them into obedience and submission to their masters. Must I argue that a system thus marked with blood and stained with pollution is wrong? No, I will not. I have better employments for my time and strength than such arguments would imply. What then remains to be argued? Is it that slavery is not divine, that God did not establish it, that our doctors of divinity are mistaken? There is blasphemy in that. That which is inhumane cannot be divine. Who can reason on such a proposition? I cannot. The time for such argument is past. At a time like this, scorching in irony, not convincing argument is needed. Oh, had I the ability and could I reach the nation's ear, I would today pour out a fiery stream of biting ridicule, blasting reproach, withering sarcasm, and stern rebuke. For it is not light that is needed, but fire. It is not the gentle shower, but thunder. We need the storm, the whirlwind, and the earthquake. The feeling of the nation must be quickened. The conscience of the nation must be roused. The propriety of the nation must be startled. The hypocrisy of the nation must be exposed, and its crimes against God and man must be proclaimed and denounced. What to the American slave is your 4th of July? I answer, a day that reveals to him more than all other days in the year the gross injustice and cruelty to which he is the constant victim. To him, your celebration is a sham, your boasted liberty an unholy license, your national greatness swelling vanity, your sounds of rejoicing are empty and heartless. Your denunciations of tyrants, brash, fronted, impudence, your shouts of liberty and equality, hollow, mockery, your prayers and hymns, your sermons and thanksgiving, with all your religious parade and solemnity, are to him mere bombast, fraud, deception, empty, and hypocrisy, a thin veil to cover up crimes which would disgrace a nation of savages. There is not a nation on the earth guilty of practices more shocking and bloody than are the people of these United States at this very hour. Go where you may, Search where you will. Roam through all the monasteries and dispositions of the old world. Search out every abuse, and when you have found the last, lay your facts by the side of the everyday practices of this nation, and you will say with me that for revolting barbarity and shameless hypocrisy, America reigns without a rival. Take the American slave trade, which is especially preposterous just now and carried on in all the large towns and cities in one half of this Confederacy. In several states, this trade is a chief source of wealth. It is called the internal slave trade. In order to divert from it the horror with which the foreign slave trade is contemplated, the trade has long since been denounced by this government as piracy, as execrable traffic. To arrest it, this nation keeps a squadron at immense cost on the coast of Africa. Everywhere in this country, it is safe to speak of this foreign slave trade as a most inhumane trade, opposed alike to the laws of God and man. It is, however, a notable fact that while so much execration is poured out by Americans upon those engaged in foreign slave trade, the men engaged in the slave trade between the states pass without condemnation, and their business is deemed honorable.
So one of our young readers has a question for you guys.
What, if anything, could be creative and reimagine what does change look like to you? How does change happen?
So what, if anything, could be recreated and reimagined? And what does change look like to you? And how does that change happen? So as we're coming to the conclusion of our speech, I want to give you those two questions, or at least young princess wanted to give you those two questions to ponder on. And now it's my turn to read. Behold, the practical operation of this internal slave trade, the American slave trade sustained by American politics and American religion. Here you will see men and women reared like swine for the market. You know what is a swine drover? I will show you a man drover. They inhabit all of southern states. They preambulate the country in the crowded highways of the nation with droves of human stock. You will see one of these human flesh jobbers armed with pistols, whip, and bowie knife, driving a company of 100 men, women, and children from the Potomac to the slave market at New Orleans. These wretched people are to be sold singly or in lots to soup purchasers. They are food for the cotton field and the deadly sugar mill. Mark the sad procession as it is moved wearily along, and the inhumane wretch who drives them. Hear his savage yells and his blood-chilling oaths as he hurries on his affrighted captives. There, see the old man with locks lined, thin and gray, Cast one glance, if you please, upon that young mother whose shoulders are bare to the scorching sun, her briny tears falling on the brow of the babe in her arms. See too that girl of 13, weeping, yes, weeping, as she thinks of the mother from whom she has been torn. The drove moves tardily. Heat and sorrow have nearly consumed their strengths. Suddenly you hear a quick snap like a discharge of a rifle. The fetters clank and the chain rattles simultaneously. Your ears are saluted with a scream that seems to have torn its way to the center of your soul. The crack you heard was the sound of the slave whip. The scream you heard was the woman you saw with the babe. Her speed was faltered under the weight of her child in her chains. That gash on her shoulder tells her to move on. Follow the droves to New Orleans. Attend the auction. See men examined like horses. See the forms of women rudely and brutally exposed to the shocking gaze of American slave buyers. See this drove sold and separated forever, and never forget the deep, sad sobs that arose from the scattered multitude. Tell me, citizens, where under the sun you can witness a spectacle more fiendish and shocking? Yet this is but a glance at the American slave trade as it exists at this moment in the United States. Fellow citizens, this murderous traffic today in active operation in this boasted republic, in the solitude of my spirit, I see clouds of dust raised on the highways of the South. I see the bleeding footsteps. I hear the doleful wail of fettered humanity on the way to the slave markets, where the victims are to be sold like horses, sheep, and swine, knocked off to the highest bidder. There I see the tenderest ties ruthlessly broken to gratify the lust, caprice, and rapacity of buyers and sellers of men. By an act of the American Congress, not yet 2 years old, slavery has been nationalized in its most horrible and revolting form. Mason and Dixon lines have been obliterated. New York has become as Virginia, and the power to hold, hunt, and sell men, women, and children as slaves remains no longer a mere state institution, but is now an institution of the whole United States. The power is coextensive with the Star-Spangled Banner and American Christianity. Where these go, may also go the merciless slave hunter. Where these are, man is not sacred. He is a bird for the sportsman's gun. By that most foul and fiendish of all human decrees, the liberty and person of every man are put in peril. Your broad Republican domain is hunting ground for men. Your lawmakers have commanded all good citizens to engage in this hellish sport. Your president, your secretary of state enforce as a duty you owe to your free and glorious country and to your God that you do this accursed thing. Not fewer than 40 Americans have, within the past 2 years, been hunted down and without a moment's warning hurried away and changed and consigned to slavery and excruciating torture. Some of these have had wives and children, dependent on them for bread, but of this, no account was made. The right of the hunter to do his prey stands superior to the right of marriage, and to all rights in this republic, the rights of God included. For black men, there are neither law or nor justice, humanity, nor religion. The fugitive slave law makes no mercy to them. A crime and bribes the judge who tries them. An American judge gets $10 for every victim he consigns. to slavery, and 5 when he fails to do so. The oath of any 2 villains is sufficient under this hell black enactment to send the most pious and exemplary black men to the remorseless jaws of slavery. His own testimony means nothing. He can bring no witness for himself. The minister of American justice is bound by the law to hear but one side, and that side is the side of the oppressor. Let his damning fact be perpetually told. Let it be thundered around the world that in tyrant killing, king hating, people loving, democratic, Christian America, the seats are filled with judges who hold their offices under an open and palpable bribe and are bound in deciding the cases of a man's liberty only to hear his accuser. In glaring violation of justice, in shameless disregard of the forms of administrating law, in cunning arrangement to entrap the defenseless, and in diabolical intent, this fugitive slave law stands alone in the annals of tyrannical legislature. Our next reader is Ms. Nadia Pakwa.
Americans, your Republican politics, not less than your Republican religion, are flagrantly inconsistent. You boast of your love of liberty, your superior civilization, and your pure Christianity, while the whole political power of the nation is solemnly pledged to support and perpetuate the enslavement of 3 million of your countrymen. You hurl your anathemas and the crowned-headed tyrants of Russia and Austria, and pride yourselves on your democratic institutions, while you yourselves consent to be the mere tools and bodyguards of the tyrants of Virginia and Carolina. You invite to your shores fugitives of oppression from abroad, honor them with banquets, greet them with ovations, cheer them, toast them, salute them, protect them, and pour out your money to them like water. But the fugitives from your own land you advertise, hunt, arrest, shoot, and kill? You discourse eloquently on the dignity of labor, yet you sustain a system which in its very essence casts a stigma upon labor. You can bare your bosom to the storm of British artillery, to throw off a 3-penny tax on tea, and yet wring the last hard-earned farthing from the grasp of the black laborers of your country. You profess to believe that of one blood God made all nations of men to dwell on the face of all the earth, and hath commanded all men everywhere to love one another, yet you notoriously hate and glory in your hatred all men whose skins are not colored like your own. You declare before the world, and are understood by the world to declare, that you hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal and are endowed by their Creator in certain inalienable rights, and that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And yet you hold securely in a bondage which, according to your own Thomas Jefferson, is worse than ages of that which your fathers rose in rebellion to oppose, a 7th part of the inhabitants of your country. Fellow citizens, I will not enlarge further on your national inconsistencies. The existence of slavery in this country brands your republicanism as a sham, your humanity as a base pretense, and your Christianity as a lie. It destroys your moral power abroad. It corrupts your politicians at home. It saps the foundation of religion. It makes your name a hissing and a byword to a mocking earth. Be warned, a horrible reptile is coiled up in your nation's bosom. The venomous creature is nursing at the tender breasts of your youthful republic. For the love of God, tear away and fling from your hideous monster and let the weight of the 20 millions crush and destroy it forever.
Thank you. And we are going to conclude with our youth who began the speech, Prince Jason Castellano.
I just want to announce that Congressman's running a bit late. We wanted to share that with you. He's in some traffic heading this way, so I just wanted to make sure you knew that.
Thank you so much. Hold it. You wanna hold it?
Allow me to say in conclusion, notwithstanding the dark picture I have this day presented of the state of this nation, I do not despair of this country. There are forces in operation which must inevitably work the downfall of slavery. I therefore leave off where I began, with hope, while drawing encouragement from the Declaration of Independence, the great principles it contains, and the genius of American institutions. My spirit is cheered by the obvious tendencies of the age. Nations do not now stand in the same relation to each other that they did ages ago. No nation can now shut itself up from the surrounding world and trot around in the same old path of its fathers without interference. The time was when such could be done, but a change has now come over the affairs of mankind. Walled cities and empires have become unfashionable. The arm of commerce has borne away the gates of the strong city. Intelligence is the penetrating the dark corners of the globe when steam and lightning are chartered agents. Oceans no longer divide but link nations together. From Boston to London is now a holiday excursion. Space is comparatively annihilated, though thoughts expressed on one side of the Atlantic are distinctly hard on the other. In the fervent aspirations of William Lloyd Garrison, I say, and let every heart join in saying it.
And everybody should have their reading on the table. If you don't have a reading, no. And if you'll all join me in us in saying,
Godspeed, the day when human blood shall cease to flow, and every clime be understood, the claims of human brotherhood, and each return for evil good, not blow for blow. That day will come, all feuds to end, and change into a faithful friend, each foe.
okay, so we know this material can be quite heavy as I explained throughout. So at this time, I'd like you to stand or sit if you're more comfortable, and join me in just a breathing exercise so we can kind of release some of that energy. So I want you to go ahead and relax and close your eyes. Relax your shoulders. Let your hands rest naturally. Inhale slowly. Take a deep breath through your nose for a count of 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold your breath. Now gently, for the count of 4, exhale slowly and completely through your mouth. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now pause briefly after exhaling for a count of 1, 2, and whenever you're ready, feel free to open your eyes.
At this time, we'd like to welcome, is Paul here? Did Paul make it? He just left. Oh, geez, okay. Well, we'll welcome Ms. Carol Fiola. And we're still waiting on Congressman Jake Auchincloss.
Said the traffic, and he texted me that he would be probably 12:45, to be honest. He's on his way. I'll probably miss him, but
We know he was coming from quite the distance. Thank you. We are happy to share this history, this celebration with all of you. Bristol Black Collective, the Fall River Juneteenth Committee are grateful for the continued support we've received for cultural events and remind you that this is a safe space for everyone. Thank you for joining us for this program. Please join us at the close of the program in sharing a traditional African American meal, which would have been shared on Juneteenth. It is provided by our gracious host, Duke's Bakery, and that ends this program.